dark colour that I get from sweet onions that have been caramelised slowly in a pan. And what I do is cut them straight in half like this and remove the core. What I'm going to do is slice my onions nice and thin like this. So when I put them into my pot and stir them, it'll take about 5 or 10 minutes. They'll get that rich, dark caramel flavour, which will also colour the stew. You could, of course, use a little slicer, but for me, a sharp knife always does the trick. Now my pot is on a medium to high heat. I want a fair bit of heat to actually caramelise the onions. And this time, instead of putting butter in there, which I know I love using butter, I'm going to use olive oil. A nice big splush of olive oil, because when you want colour, olive oil is fantastic. If you want to cook it nice and low and slow, butter is what you use. Now my pot's nice and hot, turn that up again, and in go my onions. Hear that sound? That's what you want to hear, that sizzle. I know that these onions are going to caramelise really quickly. Now I'm ready with my spoon and I stir that around. You can already see I've got a little bit of golden already. You can see a little bit on the edge there. It's already starting to caramelise. And this is the thing, when you're caramelising onions, don't walk away. They'll burn very, very quickly. So it's an idea to stay with them, keep an eye on them, and every minute or so, give them a stir around and break up the onions so they cook really evenly. Now what I'm going to do is move this over to my other pan over here, and I'm going to prepare my venison. Now venison's easy to get if you know where to get it. Your butcher will help you out. Give him a couple of days notice and he'll track down the best venison. For this dish, I'm using some venison shoulder, which I think is a beautiful meat. And the thing about venison, have a look at it. It's really lean. Sometimes there's a bit of sinew in there, but all you need to do is cut it out. And you know what, a dish like this where I'm cooking it nice and low and slow, all the sinew in there will break apart and it'll be nice and soft and buttery. Now look at these onions, cooking beautifully. They're starting to caramelise. And when you're doing this, you'll see the bottom of the pot will start to go dark. That's a good thing. That's the colour that we want to make this stew nice and brown. So I've turned that down just a little bit, just so it doesn't burn. Now my meat I'm dicing into a nice big cube, a couple of centimetres by a couple of centimetres. And look at that, beautiful, nice, dark meat. In my bowl here, I'm going to put my venison, some salt, because you always use salt on meat, nice amount of salt on there, and some pepper, good old twist of pepper. And what I'm going to do, which is something I don't often do, I'm going to put a bit of flour on the venison. So when I brown it, I get a lovely colour on the outside. But the flour also helps to thicken the stew. So at the end, when it's all cooked down and reduced, I've got a lovely thick stew. It's up to you. You could always brown your venison without the flour and add a little bit of corn flour at the end, or potato if you don't like gluten. But for me, a little bit of flour on this stew makes it. Into my pan here, I've got a nice amount of olive oil. And what I want to do is brown my venison. So a nice high heat. There we go, give that a stir there. A nice high heat, and I put my venison in. You can see that sizzling straight away. Now I won't put all this in at once, because if I do, the meat won't brown. It'll just stew, and that's not what I want. I want a nice brown coating on all my meat there. So I put this around here on the outside and do it nice and slowly. This will give you plenty of time to keep an eye on your onions and keep an eye on your venison as well. Look at that. Beautiful. Now give that another stir around. This smells amazing. When you're caramelising onions, it fills the whole house or the dungeon with a beautiful sweet aroma. Look at that, browning off beautifully. I need to put some vegetables in here now. And I've got a simple array of vegetables. Some celery, carrot and leek. They go with everything, and all you need to do is get your celery, cut it down the middle. For a braise like this or a stew, I want everything to be sort of chunky. So as it cooks, it'll take about an hour and a half for this to cook. All the vegetables will hold their shape and become a beautiful part of the stew. Cut it straight through the middle there like that and put it aside. With my carrot, I just cut it straight through the middle here like that, and then making sure I keep it nice and flat, straight through the middle there like that. Carrot give a stew like this a real sweetness and great colour, and they'll hold up to a long cooking time, so you've got a little bit of crunch at the end. And my leek, I cut straight through the middle here like this, and then all I need to do is cut it lengthways like that, and into about centimetre dice all the way through. My onions are caramelised beautifully. They've got a nice little golden colour. You can see the outside of the pot is nice and brown. I've got some butter here, and I've put a nice healthy block of butter. well, maybe not so healthy, into my pot. Then I'll slow down the cooking. And into my pot now, I'll put my celery, my carrot, and my leek. And I want to sweat it down in the butter, just a little bit to bring all the flavours together. In go the leek, which will soften it up perfectly. Here we go. And just give that a bit of a stir around. And the butter's going to melt and I'll get a beautiful flavour through there. And the beauty of it, as this cooks, all the outside coating around that pot will cook back into the actual stew. Now you can see my venison is browned beautifully. They're beautiful to eat like this. They're going to have a little bit of chew to it, but you could just imagine picking this up with a fork and chewing on it, and it'll have a beautiful crispness to it, an amazing flavour. But cooked for an hour and a half in a stew like this, that's when it all comes together. Now my other pieces here, shake off the excess flour, and these will brown in no time. Now my pot here, it's all coming together. This is sweating off beautifully. I want to add some beautiful flavours, and there's nothing better than adding some good dark beer. Any dark beer is great for this, but for me, I like Belgian beer. Belgians make the best Trappist beer. Dark beer, which gives it a rich sweetness, a little bit of bitterness in there, but it all comes together to give it an amazing flavour. Just stir that around. It might seem like a waste of good beer, I know, but believe me, I've got more in the fridge, and when you eat this stew and taste the flavour that the beer gives the venison, they go together so well, you'll agree that it's a great use for beer. A little bit of stock in here as well, and I'll let that simmer. In a minute or so, my venison here, when I turn it over, will be all ready to go into the pot. All I need to add now is a couple of bay leaves straight into there like that, and some thyme. A couple of sprigs of thyme, and this will give it a lovely herby flavour. Now you can see my venison's browned beautifully, and all I do now is pick it up straight into the pot here like this. If you wanted to, you could deglaze the pan, because in the bottom of this pan here are all the crispy flavours. There's not a lot of oil in here, which is good. It's been soaked up by the flour. So all I need to do now is grab a little bit of my stock straight into the pan. Oh, look at that. Swish it around like that, and you pick up all the goodness, all those little bits of flavour that are left in the pan here. You pick them up, and you pop them straight into your pot like that. Now all we need to do is let this all come together and tenderise. And I'll know when it's cooked when I pick up the piece of venison, touch it with my fingers, and it falls apart. Venison meat comes from various species of deer and is known for its rich colour and gamey flavour. It's one of the leanest cuts of red meat. It's far lower in cholesterol and calories, and less fat than beef or pork or even lamb. But I say, where's the fun in that? That's why I like to add things like olive oil, butter, and even bacon, which give it so much more flavour and more moisture. It's a very lean and gamey meat, and it goes so well with sweet things like pork, sherry, and even cherries. You might need to hunt around a little bit, but when you find that specialist butcher, you'll go back every time. It's a big hearty dish, perfect for the cold weather in Scandinavia. It's great on its own like this, but it needs something to go with it. My mate from Sweden, Lars, has given me a fantastic recipe for dumplings. And you know why they're so good? Because they've got bacon in them. And they're really easy to make. You can make them by the side of a campfire. Here's what he does. Caramelise 1 onion and 4 rashers of bacon that have been finely chopped in a pan. Some fresh herbs like parsley and 2 free-range eggs. Just give them a little bit of a beat up. In my big bowl I add 3 cups of fresh breadcrumbs, 60 grams of flour, 2 eggs, and the bacon and onions that have been cooled. Some thyme and some parsley, give it some freshness, and of course salt and pepper. That's what makes it nice. Moisten it up with a 1/4 cup of milk. Just mix it around till you get a lovely soft dough. Now all you need to do is with your hands, grab out some of the dough and make some lovely balls. Cooking is easy. Some simmering stock, throw in your balls, 8 to 10 minutes, they'll be puffed up, moist and juicy. My dumplings are cooked beautifully. My venison stew is ready. But just to finish it off, I'm going to give it about a tablespoon of vinegar just to give it some sharpness, and some red currant jelly. You could of course use jam if you really wanted to, but red currant jelly is beautiful. It just gives it a nice little sweetness, and all you need to do is stir that in. As you stir it, it melts and gives it that beautiful sweetness. Oh, I can't wait to get into this. With my spoon here, I grab my little dumplings. They've plumped up beautifully. They've soaked up all that stock. Some people like to put their dumplings on the top. Me, I like my dumplings on the bottom. Now for the stew. A couple of spoons of this lovely rich stew straight on top of the dumplings. Look at that. Beautiful. I can smell it. The venison, the vegetables, the beer in here, the dumplings, just to soak it all up. Fantastic. I think this is a great way to use up any of that leftover venison or reindeer you happen to have lying around. And of course, everyone's got a little bit of dark beer lying around. Beautiful. Let's have a taste of this. The dumpling just falls apart.